The ceremony to reclassify Pyrrhus 7 from uninhabitable to human settled took place on the second anniversary of the colony's founding. Representatives from 12 species gathered in the main assembly hall, a structure built from volcanic glass that caught the red light of the distant lava flows and scattered it into 1,000 dancing patterns across the walls. Council Speaker Threnvax stood at the central podium, looking older and somehow smaller than he had 2 years ago, when he laughed at a young human diplomat's colonization request. The weight of being wrong had settled into his scales like a burden he could not shake by unanimous vote of the Galactic Expansion Council, Threnvax announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Planet Pyrrhus 7 is hereby reclassified from Category 9 Hazard Zone to Human Settled Territory, and all previous warnings are rescinded effective immediately. Applause erupted from the human colonists gathered in the assembly hall, though it was more restrained than one might expect from such a momentous occasion. The humans had learned that celebration was best kept brief, on a world where the next challenge was always waiting. Colony Director Park Junho took the podium next, his hair now streaked with gray that had not been there when they first landed 2 years ago. We came to this world with 300 volunteers who signed papers saying they would probably die, he began. Today, our population has grown to over 800, including 43 children born right here on Pyrrhus 7. He paused, letting that number sink in. 43 children who had never known any home except a volcanic death world, and who found that completely normal. I could give a long speech about human perseverance and determination, Junho continued, but honestly, I think my people are more interested in the celebration we have planned. So I will keep this brief. Quiet laughter rippled through the human section of the audience. The galaxy told us this world was impossible, Junho said. They told us we would fail like everyone else, that we were arrogant to even try, that our technology was too primitive and our species too young to accomplish what older civilizations could not. And maybe they were right about some of that. He looked out at the assembled aliens, Valkyrie delegates still uncomfortable in the volcanic heat, Mordani engineers taking notes on every visible structure, Thrix observers analyzing the architecture with crystalline precision. Our technology is not better than yours, he admitted. Our ships are not faster, our weapons are not stronger, and our science is not more advanced. But we have something that cannot be measured or quantified or replicated. We have stubbornness. The word hung in the air, somehow more powerful than any grand declaration could have been. We refused to accept that this world could not be our home. And so we made it our home, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one eruption at a time. And we will keep doing that for as long as it takes. Junho stepped back from the podium and gestured toward the main doors. Now, if our honored guests would follow us outside, we have a human tradition we would like to share. The alien delegates exchanged uncertain glances as they followed the colonists out of the assembly hall and toward the edge of the colony. What awaited? Then there made several stop in their tracks. A natural lava pool bubbled and glowed at the base of a rocky outcropping, contained by geological features that kept it relatively stable around this pool. The humans had arranged seating chairs and benches and cushions, positioned in a rough circle facing the molten rock. Colonists were already gathering, carrying what appeared to be long sticks and small packages. Observer Kethral, who had lived among the humans long enough to recognize their traditions, watched the alien delegates. Confusion with quiet amusement. She remembered her own bewilderment. The first time she witnessed this particular ritual. What is this? Asked a Valkyrie delegate, his scales flattening with instinctive alarm at the proximity of the lava. We call it a campfire, explained cultural liaison Yoon Dassam. who had traded her diplomatic robes for casual colony clothing. Humans have gathered around fires since before we had language, and it is how we celebrate, mourn, bond, and share stories. You are using a lava pool as a fire? Best campfire in the galaxy, said a colonist as he walked past. Carrying a bag of puffy white confections, Catherall moved to stand beside the confused delegates. I know this seems strange, she said, her Mordani voice modulator translating her words perfectly. When I first saw this, I thought the humans had lost their minds. And now? Asked the Valkyrie. Now I think I understand why they survived when we did not. She pointed to the humans settling around the lava pool, young and old, scientists and laborers. People who had faced volcanic eruptions and ash storms and everything this world could throw at them. They were laughing, talking, preparing to enjoy a simple pleasure in the shadow of geological death. They do not see the danger as separate from the joy. Catherall explained. For humans, the fire that can kill them is the same fire that warms them. And they learn to live with both truths at once. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything the alien delegates had ever witnessed. Humans distributed long sticks and small white confections called marshmallows, demonstrating how to roast them over the lava pool's edge until they turned golden brown. The first Valkyrie delegate to try merely dropped his stick when his wise marshmallow caught fire. But a human child showed him how to blow it out and explained that some people actually preferred the burnt-taste Ambassador Krelthax, who had warned Dasim that Pyrrhus 7 would kill her species, sat stiffly on a volcanic rock and watched the humans celebrate their impossible victory when Dasim approached and offered him a roasted marshmallow. He hesitated. I do not understand your people, he admitted. We have been called many things, Dasim replied with a gentle smile. But understandable is rarely one of them. She pressed the stick into his clawed hand. Try it. The marshmallow was strange sweet and soft with a slightly caramelized exterior from the volcanic heat. It was perhaps the most alien thing Krelthax had ever tasted, and somehow also the most human. This is what your people do, he said slowly, realization dawning in his ancient eyes. You take the things that should destroy you and you turn them into opportunities for joy. Something like that. Dasim agreed around them. Humans and aliens mingled in the red glow of the lava pool. A Thrix journalist cautiously consumed a marshmallow and immediately asked for 3 more. Mordani engineers debated the optimal roasting technique with human colonists, who had been perfecting their methods for 2 years. Even Speaker Threnvax, who had predicted human failure with such certainty, accepted a marshmallow and admitted it was surprisingly pleasant. Catherall sat between a human geologist and a Valkyrie delegate, feeling something she had not experienced in her entire career as an observer. She felt like she belonged. You chose to stay, said Chief Science Officer Shin Yejin, settling beside her. I did? Any regrets? Catherall looked at the gathering around the lava pool beings from across the galaxy, sharing a simple human tradition on a finer Shinana world that should have killed them all. Only that my people never learned what your people seem to understand instinctively, she said. And what is that? That survival is not about avoiding danger, Catherall replied. It is about finding reasons to live despite it. Yejin smiled and handed her a fresh marshmallow. Welcome to the family. As the celebration continued into the night, the volcanoes of Pyrrhus 7 rumbled and glowed in the distance, eternal reminders of the world's deadly nature. But the humans did not flinch or flee. They roasted marshmallows and told stories and laughed with alien guests who were slowly beginning to understand something fundamental about the strange species from Earth. The galaxy had thrown its worst at humanity, planet of fire and death and impossible odds, and humanity had responded by bringing snacks above them. The stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the darkness, Other worlds waited to be conquered. The humans would find them eventually. They always did, and wherever they went. They would bring the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat, the same ability to find joy in the shadow of danger, and probably the same bag of marshmallows, because that was what it meant to be human. Not better technology or superior strength or advanced intelligence, just an unshakable belief that any fire, no matter how deadly, could become a campfire if you were stubborn enough to try, and the willingness to share that fire with anyone brave enough to sit beside them. 1 year after the first human boot touched the surface of Pyrrhus 7, the Galactic Council received a report that caused several delegates to request immediate verification. The human colony had not failed. It had expanded. Ambassador Krelthax of the Valkyrie read the report 3 times before accepting that the data was accurate. The original settlement had grown into a proper colony with 3 additional outposts spread across the highland regions. A functioning agricultural dome used volcanic soil nutrients to grow crops that fed the entire population. Mining operations harvested rare minerals from cooling lava flows, and most inexplicably of all, a tourism industry had begun accepting visitors. This cannot be correct, Krelthax said to his aide. Humans are operating tourist facilities on a Category 9 hazard world? The report has been verified by 3 independent sources. Ambassador, the news spread through galactic media like wildfire. Journalists from a dozen species requested permission to visit the colony, and the humans welcomed them with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. A Valkyrie news crew was the first to arrive, followed by reporters from the Thrix Collective, the Mordani Engineering Corps, and half a dozen smaller species, who simply wanted to see the impossible for themselves. What they found defied everything they thought they understood about survival. The main colony had transformed from a survival camp into something that could only be described as a town. Prefabricated structures had been replaced with permanent buildings constructed from volcanic rock. Streets wound between habitats that glowed with interior lights. Children, actual children, born in the colony or brought by later transport, played in temperature-controlled recreation domes while rivers of magma flowed visible through reinforced viewing windows. The humans had not just survived, they had built lives. This is our community center, explained cultural liaison Yoon Dassam as she led a group of alien journalists through the colony. We hold weekly gatherings here for social events, educational programs, and occasional competitions. Competitions? Asked a Thrix journalist, her crystalline body refracting the red light from nearby lava flows. What kind of competitions occur on a volcanic planet? Mostly trivia and cooking contests, Dassam replied with a smile. Though we did have a volcano photography competition last month that was very popular. The journalists exchanged glances that conveyed universal confusion. The tour continued to the agricultural dome, where botanists had engineered crops specifically adapted to growing volcanic soil enriched with minerals from recent eruptions. A Mordani reporter examined the plants with four-handed precision. These specimens show remarkable adaptation, she noted. How did you develop such specialized strains so quickly? We brought seed stocks modified for extreme conditions, replied lead botanist Song Herin. Earth has volcanic regions where farmers have grown food for thousands of years. So we simply applied old knowledge to new circumstances. But the destination that shocked the journalists most was Bae Minho's restaurant. Chef Bae had constructed his establishment on a platform overlooking an active lava field, with cooking stations that drew heat directly from vents in the volcanic rock below. When the journalists arrived, humans were casually dining while watching molten rock flow past their tables. Welcome to the hearth, Minho announced proudly, gesturing to the glowing landscape around them. We offer the finest cuisine on Pyrrhus 7, cooked with the freshest heat available. A Valkyrie journalist stepped back from the platform edge, his scales darkening with instinctive fear. You eat here voluntarily? Best steaks on the planet, said a human diner without looking up from her meal. The lava-seared vegetables are incredible too. Ambassador Krelthax arrived later that week as part of an official delegation. Investigating the colony's success, he had expected to find humans struggling to maintain a desperate foothold against an overwhelming environment. Instead, he found a thriving community that treated the deadliest planet in the sector like home. When he finally confronted Dassem, his confusion had transformed into something closer to desperation. I must understand, Krelthax said, his voice tight with emotions his species rarely displayed. My people came to this world with superior technology and thousands of years of experience, and it killed us. So how have you accomplished what we could not? Dassem considered the question carefully before responding. Ambassador, may I ask you something first? Krelthax nodded. When your people came to Pyrrhus 7, what was their goal? To establish a research station and study the planet's unique geological properties. And when the volcano threatened them, what did they do? Krelthax's scales rippled with the memory. They attempted to reinforce their position and resist the eruption. That was their mistake. Dassem said gently, they saw Pyrrhus 7 as an obstacle to overcome, a problem to solve. But we saw it as a partner to work with. The planet tried to kill you too. Yes, and it will try again. Because that is what planets do, Dassem replied. But we did not come here expecting safety. So we came prepared for danger, and there is a difference. She led him to an observation point overlooking the colony, where humans worked and lived and laughed against a backdrop of flowing magma and ash-filled skies. On Earth, humans evolved alongside volcanoes and earthquakes and ice ages and extinction events. She continued, our ancestors watched their entire world change around them, sometimes in a single generation. And they did not give up or run away because they adapted. Because that is what we do. But why? Krelthax asked, why put yourselves through such hardship when safer worlds exist? Dassem smiled, and there was something ancient and knowing in her expression. Because the hard worlds are the ones that make us stronger, she said, and because we are stubborn enough to believe that anywhere can be home if we try hard enough. Krelthax stood in silence for a long moment, watching a group of human children learn about volcanic geology through a reinforced window that showed an active eruption in the distance. They were not afraid. They were fascinated. My people will need time to understand this, he finally said. Take all the time you need. Dassem replied, we will still be here. As the ambassador departed to file his report, Observer Kethral, now a permanent resident who had chosen to stay after her observation assignment ended, approached Dassem. He still does not truly understand. Kethral said, no. Dassem agreed, but he is beginning to. And that is enough for now. Why did you stay? Dassem asked the Mordani. When your assignment ended, you could have returned home. Kethral looked out at the volcanic landscape that had become strangely familiar over the past year. Because I wanted to learn what you know, she said. About survival? About stubbornness, Kethral corrected. My people calculate risks and minimize exposure to danger. But you calculate risks and then do the dangerous thing anyway if you believe it is worth doing. And I think that is something the galaxy needs to understand better. Dassem laughed a warm, genuine sound that somehow fit perfectly in the hellish environment around them. Stay as long as you like, she said. We have room for anyone willing to learn below them. The colony continued its impossible existence. And somewhere in the distance, another volcano rumbled with the promise of future challenges. The humans heard it and kept working. They had learned long ago that the universe would never stop trying to kill them. They had also learned that giving up was not an option. The warning came at midnight. Colony time seismic sensors buried throughout the Highland Plateau began screaming alerts as Mount Corvax, the largest volcano visible from the colony, showed signs of activity that made every scientist on Pyrrhus 7 stop breathing for a moment. This is not a normal eruption pattern. Chief Science Officer Shin Yajin announced to the Emergency Council gathered in the main habitat. The magma chamber beneath Corvax is filling faster than our models predicted, and we are looking at a potential super eruption within 72 hours. Colony Director Park Junho studied the holographic display showing the mountain's internal structure, his expression calm despite the catastrophic data floating before him. Define potential super eruption, volcanic explosivity index of 7 or higher. Yajin replied grimly, the same classification of event that destroyed the Valkyrie station. Murmurs rippled through the assembled colonists, and Mordani observer Kethril felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. This was it, the moment when reality would crush human arrogance and prove that some worlds simply could not be conquered. She had seen the footage from Station Ember, watched the pyroclastic flows consume everything in their path. The humans had no technology that could stop a super eruption. No species did. Galactic Council is transmitting an evacuation order. Communications Officer Wang Jisu reported from her station. They are offering emergency transport for all personnel and strongly recommend immediate departure. The room fell silent, and every eye turned to Director Park. He was still studying the volcano data, his fingers tracing the projected lava flow patterns with thoughtful precision. How long until evacuation ships could reach us? He asked. 14 hours for the nearest available transport. And how long until the eruption? Best estimate is 68 hours. But it could be sooner. Junho nodded slowly, then turned to face his people. 300 colonists looked back at him, waiting for the order to retreat. Kethril expected fear in their eyes. Desperation, the survival instinct that should drive any rational being to flee from certain death. Instead, she saw something else entirely. She saw determination. We are not evacuating, Junho said. The statement should have caused panic. It should have sparked arguments and accusations of madness. But the colonists simply nodded, as if they had expected nothing less. Director, I must formally object, Kethril interjected. Stepping forward, a super eruption will destroy everything within 100 kilometers. And your colony is directly in the projected impact zone. I appreciate your concern, Observer, Junho replied. But we prepared for this possibility before we ever left Earth. That is impossible. No preparation can stop a volcano. You are correct. Junho agreed. We cannot stop it, but we can survive it. What followed was the most astonishing display of coordinated action Kethril had ever witnessed. The humans did not panic or despair. They moved Emergency Protocol Vulcan. They called it. Within 1 hour, the entire colony shifted into survival mode. Underground shelters that had been constructed during the first week of settlement were activated and inspected. These bunkers were not the reinforced structures that other species had tried and failed to protect. They were pressure vessels buried deep in the bedrock, designed to ride out the eruption rather than resist it. Resource caches placed at strategic locations around the colony were checked and sealed. Food, water, medical supplies, and spare equipment had been stockpiled since day one, distributed, so that no single disaster could wipe out everything. But the most incredible part of Protocol Vulcan was what the humans called the diversion team. You want to do what? Kethril demanded when she heard the plan volunteer coordinator, Oh Minjun, pulled on his heat suit with practiced efficiency as he explained. We are going to plant seismic charges along the western ridge of Mount Corvax, he said. When they detonate, The pressure release should direct the primary lava flow away from the colony and toward the lowlands instead. You are going to deliberately trigger explosions on an erupting volcano. Pre-erupting, Wenjin corrected. And yes, that is exactly what we are going to do. This is madness. Minjin paused in his preparations and looked at the Mordani observer with an expression she could not quite read. On Earth, we have people who run into burning buildings to save strangers. He said, we have people who chase tornadoes to study them, who climb mountains that kill dozens every year, who dive into the deepest oceans despite knowing the pressure could crush them instantly. So compared to all that, planning some explosives on a volcano is actually pretty reasonable. The diversion team departed 3 hours later. 12 volunteers in specially modified heat suits, carrying enough explosives to level a small city. Kethral watched them go from the observation deck, certain she was witnessing a mass suicide mission. The next 48 hours were the longest of her life. Communication with the diversion team was sporadic, interrupted by ash storms and electromagnetic interference from the increasingly active volcano. Inside the colony, humans worked tirelessly to complete final preparations. Children were moved to the deepest shelters first, followed by essential personnel. Non-essential equipment was abandoned or secured, and throughout it all, no one screamed or cried or begged for rescue. They worked when the diversion team finally reported success. Kethral was in the command bunker with Director Park. The message was brief, distorted by static, but the meaning was clear. Charges placed and armed. Minjin's voice crackled through the speakers. Detonation sequence initiated. And we are heading back now. The explosions registered on seismic monitors throughout the colony. A chain of controlled blasts that ripped through the western ridge and created a new path of least resistance for the building pressure. When Mount Korvax finally erupted 18 hours later, the main pyroclastic flow did not come directly toward the colony. It veered west, exactly as the humans had predicted, pouring billions of tons of molten rock into the uninhabited lowlands. Instead, the colony was not spared entirely. Nothing on Pyrrhus 7 ever escaped the planet's wrath completely. Ash fell like black snow for 3 days straight, burying the surface structures under meters of volcanic debris. Toxic gases seeped through air filtration systems that worked overtime to keep the bunkers habitable. 2 outlying storage depots were destroyed when smaller, secondary flows reached them. But when the eruption finally subsided and the humans emerged from their shelters, Kethral counted them. All 300 colonists had survived. The diversion team had made it back with only minor injuries. Their heat suits scorched and partially melted, but still functional. Director Park stood on the ash-covered ground, surveying the damage to his colony with the same calm expression he wore when they first arrived. Damage assessment? He asked. 60% of surface structures require repairs or replacement, reported engineer Beak Mira, brushing ash from her suit. Power systems held. Water recycling is operational, and the greenhouse dome cracked but did not breach. Junho nodded once. Then we start rebuilding immediately. One colonist, a young botanist named Song Haran, who had spent 3 days in a bunker, walked past Kethral while carrying salvage equipment. Pretty rough one, Haran said casually, as if discussing bad weather. But honestly, I expected worse. And at least we did not have to evacuate. Kethral watched the human disappear into the ash-covered ruins. And for the first time in her career as an observer, she had absolutely no idea what to write in her report. She had just witnessed a species treat a planetary extinction event like a difficult work shift, and they had one. The Galactic Expansion Council chamber fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life, showing a world that glowed like a burning ember against the darkness of space. Pyrrhus 7 was not a planet that invited visitors. Rivers of molten rock carved through its surface like veins of fire, and ash storms swept across continents with enough force to strip metal from bone. The atmosphere itself seemed to burn, thick with sulfur and heat that could melt standard spacecraft hulls within hours. Council Speaker Threnvax, a towering Valkyrie with scales that shimmered like polished obsidian, raised one clawed hand to silence the murmuring delegates. "We are here to officially declare Pyrrhus 7 permanently uninhabitable," Threnvax announced, his voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. 3 colonization attempts have ended in complete failure, and the Council sees no reason to permit further loss of life. The delegates nodded in solemn agreement. Everyone in that chamber remembered the disasters. The Valkyrie had been first, confident that their heat-resistant biology would allow them to tame the volcanic world. They had established Research Station Ember on what their scientists determined was a stable volcanic plain. 17 days later, an eruption consumed the entire station and the 400 researchers within it. The crystalline Thrix had tried next, believing their silicon-based bodies could withstand temperatures that would kill carbon-based life. But Pyrrhus 7 did not simply burn, it fluctuated. The planet's thermal cycle swung from extreme heat to relative cold with brutal unpredictability, and the Thrix shattered like glass when their bodies could not adapt quickly enough. Only the Mordani had come close to success. Their engineering was legendary throughout the galaxy, and they had constructed a habitat that could theoretically withstand anything the planet threw at them. For 3 months, they held on, fighting eruptions and ash storms and toxic atmospheric breaches. Then the ground beneath their colony simply opened up, swallowing 40% of their expedition into a magma chamber no one had detected. The survivors fled and never looked back. Pyrrhus 7 represents a challenge beyond current galactic capabilities. Threnvax continued, tapping a control that made the holographic planet rotate slowly. The Council recommends it be classified as a Category 9 hazard zone, forbidden to all settlement attempts indefinitely. I object to that classification. The voice came from the back of the chamber, and every alien head turned to locate its source. A young human woman stood from her seat in the observer's gallery, her dark hair pulled back in a practical style, and her expression calm despite the hundreds of incredulous eyes now fixed upon her. Yoon Dassam, junior diplomat of the United Earth Coalition, walked down the central aisle with steady steps. She was shorter than almost every species in the room, her frame small and seemingly fragile compared to the armored Valkyrie or the towering Mordani, but she moved with a confidence that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. The human delegation wishes to submit a formal colonization request for Pyrrhus 7, Dassam said, her voice clear and unwavering. For a moment, silence held the chamber. Then the laughter began. It started with a chittering sound from the insectoid Krixali delegation, spread to rumbling chuckles from the Mordani observers, and soon filled the entire chamber with the sound of a dozen species finding genuine amusement in what they assumed was a joke. Threnvax did not laugh. The Valkyrie speaker studied the human woman with ancient eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall, and something in her stance troubled him. She was not embarrassed by the laughter. She was waiting for it to end. Delegate Yoon, Threnvax said, raising his hand again to quiet the chamber. Perhaps you do not fully understand the situation, so I will explain it simply for your young species. I understand perfectly. Speaker, Dassam replied. 3 advanced civilizations attempted to colonize Pyrrhus 7 and failed catastrophically. And you believe this proves the planet cannot be settled? That is correct. With respect, Speaker, it only proves that 3 civilizations were not suited to the task. More laughter rippled through the chamber, but it was less certain now. Threnvax leaned forward, his scales catching the light as he moved. And you believe humans are better suited than species with thousands of years more technological advancement? I believe humans have experience with hostile environments that most species lack. Dasim said. Our homeworld tried to kill us for our entire evolutionary history. And we are still here. A Mordani delegate stood, her forearms crossed in a gesture of skepticism. We have studied your Earth, she said. And while it has some geological activity, it is nothing compared to Pyrrhus 7. So your comparison is meaningless. Earth has supervolcanoes that have nearly driven our species to extinction. Dasim replied calmly. We have survived ice ages that covered half our planet. Asteroid impacts that killed most life on our world. And countless earthquakes and eruptions and disasters that would have ended many species. But we adapted and we survived, and we kept going. Survival is not colonization. Another delegate called out, You are correct, Dasim agreed. Which is why I'm not asking you to believe we will merely survive. Because I am telling you we will thrive. The chamber erupted in fresh arguments. Delegates shouting over each other in a cacophony of disbelief and dismissal. Threnvax let it continue for several minutes before restoring order. Delegate Yoon, the speaker said finally. Council protocol requires us to consider any formal colonization request, regardless of how foolish it may seem. So your petition will be reviewed. That is all I ask, Dasim said with a slight bow. But I must warn you, Threnvax continued, his voice dropping to something almost like concern. The Volcari lost good people on that world, and I would not wish such losses on any species, even one as reckless as yours. Your concern is noted and appreciated. Speaker, as the session ended and delegates filed out, Ambassador Krelthex of the Volcari intercepted Dasim near the chamber doors. The massive alien towered over her, his presence casting her small form in shadow. I was on the rescue ship that retrieved the survivors from Station Ember, Krelthax said quietly. I saw what that planet did to my people, how it burned them and broke them and left nothing but ash. And I tell you now that Pyrrhus 7 killed better species than yours. Dasim looked up at the ambassador without fear, and something in her eyes made the ancient Valkyrie hesitate. Ambassador, she said with a small smile. My people have a complicated relationship with fire. What does that mean? It means we learn to use it before we learn to write. And we have been dancing with flames ever since. So perhaps it is not that we are better than other species, Dasim said as she turned to leave, but simply that we have been practicing longer. She walked out of the chamber, leaving the ambassador staring after her with an expression that might have been confusion or might have been the first stirring of doubt about everything he thought he knew about survival. 1 week later, the colonization request was approved by a vote of 37-2. The only dissenting votes came from the Volcari and Mordani delegations, who cited grave concerns about human safety. The humans thanked them for their concern and began loading their colony ship. Pyrrhus 7 waited, its surface burning and churning as it had for millions of years, ready to destroy another foolish species that dared to challenge it. It had no way of knowing that this time would be different. This time, the visitors were bringing marshmallows. The colony ship Steadfast emerged from hyperspace like a silver needle threading through the darkness of space, and 300 pairs of human eyes turned toward the viewports to catch their first glimpse of their new home. Pyrrhus 7 filled the observation deck with orange and red light, its surface a churning ocean of volcanic activity that made several crew members gasp in wonder rather than fear. Colony Director Park Jun-ho stood at the main viewport with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the burning world below with the expression of a man examining a new house that needed some repairs. Atmospheric readings confirm sulfur content at 47% and surface temperatures averaging 900 degrees Celsius in the lowlands, reported Chief Science Officer Shin Ye-jing from her station, with volcanic activity detected across 63% of the continental surfaces. And the highland regions? Jung-ho asked calmly. Cooler, around 300 degrees on average. with more stable geological activity, though the ash storms are worse up there. Junho nodded slowly, still gazing at the world that had defeated 3 advanced civilizations. Manageable, he said behind him, a Mordani observer named Specialist. Catherall felt her 4 hands clench in disbelief at the human's casual assessment. She had been assigned to document the human colonization attempt, a task everyone on her homeworld expected to result in another tragedy worth studying. Her orders were simple: observe, record, and do not interfere with the human's inevitable failure. But the way these strange beings looked at Pyrrhus 7 unsettled her deeply. They should have been afraid. Every rational species would have been afraid. Instead, they looked at a hellscape of molten rock and deadly atmosphere like tourists arriving at a vacation destination. Landing team to shuttles, Junho announced over the ship's communication system. We touch down in 2 hours, so make sure your heat suits are properly calibrated and remember your training. The Steadfast carried technology that was unremarkable by galactic standards. Nothing that the Velkari or Mordani had not already tried. But as Catherall followed the humans to the shuttle bay, she noticed something strange about their equipment. Their habitats were not designed to resist the environment so much as work with it. The modular structures borrowed principles from human deep-sea pressure vessels, designed to handle extreme conditions by flexing rather than fighting. Their power systems were not nuclear or solar, but geothermal, intended to tap directly into the volcanic activity that had destroyed previous colonies. You plan to use the volcanoes for energy? Catherall asked Chief Engineer Beak Myra as she inspected a shuttle. Of course, Myra replied with a shrug. All that heat is just power waiting to be harvested, and it would be wasteful to ignore it. The volcanic activity is what killed the Velkari and crippled the Mordani attempts. Sure, if you fight it, Mira said, tightening a bolt with practiced ease. We learned a long time ago that you cannot fight nature, so you have to learn to dance with it instead. The shuttles descended through clouds of ash and sulfur, their hulls heating until they glowed faintly. In the darkness, Catherall gripped her safety harness and prepared for the worst. But the human pilots navigated the turbulent atmosphere with a calm efficiency that bordered on boredom. They had trained for this in simulators that, she later learned, were actually more difficult than the real conditions. When the first shuttle touched down on a highland plateau, Junho was the first to step out onto the surface of Pyrrhus 7. His heat suit shimmered with protective energy as he stood on the ash-covered ground. And for a long moment, he simply looked around at the hellish landscape. Mountains of cooling magma rose in the distance, their peaks glowing like dying stars. Rivers of lava carved through the lowlands visible from the plateau's edge, painting the horizon in shades of orange and red. The sky was the color of bruised iron, heavy with smoke and ash that filtered the distant sun into a bloody red disk. Beautiful, Junho said quietly. Catherall heard him through the communication link and wondered if the human's translation device was malfunctioning. No sane being would call this place beautiful. The colonists set to work immediately with an efficiency that surprised the Mordani observer within 6 hours. The first habitat modules were deployed and pressurized. Within 12 hours, they had established a functioning base camp with water recyclers, air filters, and a small greenhouse dome. Within 48 hours, they had begun construction on permanent structures. Your people work very quickly, Catherall noted as she watched human engineers drilling into the rocky ground to anchor a new habitat. We have to, replied Yejin, who had taken it upon herself to explain things to the alien observer. If we moved slowly, the planet would stay ahead of us. So we have to move faster than the danger. That is not logical, Catherall said. Other species tried to move carefully and methodically, studying every variable before acting, and they still failed. Yejin smiled, and there was something ancient in her expression that Catherall could not quite understand. Humans learned a long time ago that perfect safety is an illusion, she said. Our ancestors survived on Earth, not by being cautious, but by being adaptable. So when a predator came, they did not wait to study it. They ran or fought or hid and figured out the details later. That seems reckless. It kept us alive when more cautious species went extinct. 2 weeks into the colonization, something happened that shattered Kethral's understanding of human psychology entirely. A team of colonists finished constructing an observation platform on a cliff overlooking an active lava field. When the work was complete, they did not retreat to safety or begin scientific measurements. They brought chairs. Kethral found them sitting on the platform as rivers of molten rock flowed below, drinking beverages from sealed containers and chatting casually as if they were watching a sunset on some peaceful world. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her translator struggling to convey her confusion. "Taking a break," said a young geologist named Choi Sunho without looking away from the lava. "The view is spectacular. You are relaxing next to an active volcanic field. Best view on the planet." Another human agreed. "You could die. We could die anywhere," Sunho said with a shrug. "At least here the view is worth it." Kethral stood frozen as she tried to process what she was witnessing. The Mordani were a logical people who calculated risks and minimized unnecessary exposure to danger. The thought of sitting next to a lava field for entertainment would never occur to them. But these humans saw the deadly landscape not as a threat to be avoided, but as a wonder to be appreciated. They were not ignoring the danger. They acknowledged it freely. They simply refused to let it stop them from living. When she reported her observations to her superiors, Kethral included a note that would later be discussed in Mordani academic circles for years. "I believe I have fundamentally misunderstood human survival strategy," she wrote. "They do not survive despite their recklessness. They survive because of it. And this defies everything I thought I knew about the relationship between caution and longevity." Her superiors dismissed the observation as the result of stress from hostile environmental exposure. But Kethral knew what she had seen. She had watched humans turn a death world into a home in less than a month. And she was beginning to suspect that the galaxy had drastically underestimated what this strange species was capable of achieving. When she asked the Aegean why humans kept pushing forward when logic said they should retreat, the scientist gave her an answer that would haunt her thoughts for years. "Because we are too stubborn to know when to quit," Aegean said with a grin, "and the universe has not figured out how to make us stop yet."